We are delighted that you're joining us for another podcast of Wake Up Aligned, and it is the podcast for chiropractors where we get to talk about chiropractic lifestyle, and topics of interest. You can contact us through our email, and that is mailbag@amcfamily.com.
All right, let's get started with a brand new episode to your Wake Up Aligned podcast. I'm Tom Owen. If you don't know, I'm president of a little group called AMC, or commonly known as Aligned. And today I've got the good fortune, the blessing to have my friend, the one and only Dr. Greg Miller in the studio with me. Dr. Greg, say hello to everybody.
Hello and good morning. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, you're assuming that everybody's listening to this in the morning.
Well, that's
but
true.
It's good morning to me and you anyway.
It is good morning to us.
And we're off to a good start to a new week. You know, gosh, Dr. Greg, we just finished up here recently our annual within AMC. I know this is just a general podcast of the chiropractic profession, but inside of Aligned, we finished up our annual, what we call Blue Code, or our management and our mentors, and that whole team was in Jacksonville, Florida with us. And it's just amazing to me. I've been doing this for as you know, almost 30 years inside of AMC.
Yeah.
I've been working with clinics and management of that aspect for, gosh, I'm getting so old. I'm pushing the 40 point on that, but I'm telling you, I've never seen a vehicle, a movement, that's a better word for it, like what's happening inside of this company, AMC. I mean, the reports that are coming in from the hundreds of clinics across the country, it's not like, you always have that 80-20 rule.
Yep.
If anybody's got some tenure, you understand the 80-20 rule. You go to a group, 20% will always do 80% of the production. Right?
Yep.
That's really not happening inside of Aligned. It's across the board that there is just a very expansive growth in all areas, not just practices. There's really lives being changed. I'm just going
to interrupt it. We're seeing it not just with the brand new people that are just getting on board. We're seeing it with folks that have been around AMC Aligned for a long time. And we're about to celebrate that and have some fun with that here. And but yeah, it's really fun to see.
Yeah, you talking about some tenured AMC members. I heard Dr. George Suley. There's you a quick shout out. Dr. George Suley's he's been around a minute.
He has.
But I think he just experienced his best year ever.
I believe that's right. Yeah,
I think I heard that down in Jacksonville. Yep. His mentor was reporting that. And so, folks, if you want a motto to live by in business, really in life in general, it's your decision. It's your attitude. And you either have to be, you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotting. And as long as you have breath in your lungs, there is hope and there's something new to strive for. So it's just exciting to see that with, Dr. Suley. I know Dr. Brubaker was just recently bragging on Dr. Marine work.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of you, I don't know if you know her, she's very quiet. She doesn't like the spotlight, but she too, best year ever, I believe 2 years in a row. And this is somebody that is very well known, very established. She's probably one of the best Atlas orthogonal practitioners in the country. She sat on the board of Dr. Roy Sweat's Atlas orthogonal board for years.
Yeah.
So to see that after all these years, there's still ways that you can work smarter, not harder, and be a lot more productive. So
I had a new one of the new docs that I'm working with went and spent part of a day with her. And I know we have our certified training centers, and she's actually in that category, but she was close to him, Dr. Glick, and he wanted to come and see an office, and he went into Dr. Work's office, and she just took really, really good care of him as an encourager, just encouraging a guy who's new and new to the system and in a unique situation, feeling overwhelmed, and went in there and just really got a taste of what chiropractic is all about. And it's so important. So important that I'm seeing, as a mentor, I'm seeing our doctors so distracted by things that shouldn't be distracting them. A great example of that, I've got a shout out this morning with docs that I'm working with in Bixby, Oklahoma, Dr. Blake and Evelyn Smith. And I've been
wonderful
working,
people.
Yeah, oh man, they're great. They've got Liam is going to be a year old in April. Their little guy, and I can say this because I mean they're very very open about it. But when he came into their lives, it really distracted them from the practice, especially him. And it's taken a minute for them to get the ship righted. He has that in a text thread that I've got here, but there's a couple of things that I know that they're back on track. Number one, he sent me this text yesterday. They've had 4 R2s this week. And for those of you who don't know, that's our final report inside of Aligned where we make our treatment recommendations. But all 4 of those converted under care and were painful. So that tells me that the pulse is right in that practice again. But then I got another text from him that tells me even more so, because they've been working hard to right the ship, and they got a referral who is a general surgeon with no knowledge of what chiropractic really is, but he's suffering from tinnitus that all of his medical friends can't explain, and he landed in their office this week. That tells me things are back on track, and Innate is opening itself up for that practice. So I'm really excited for them.
Word's getting around Bixby.
Yep, it's getting around Bixby. Yep.
You know, you said something in those the various shout outs there, the encouragement that's inside of Aligned, the heartbeat of Aligned. That's why it's called, after all these years, it's still called the AMC family.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned Dr. Work, you know, she's not a certified training center, but she is what we commonly inside of AMC call an on-fire,
right.
an on-fire clinic. And which means they're willing and they're opening up. And we've got 100. We got a lot. Let's just, I don't want to put a number to it. There's a lot of offices. And it's just great to see that, because there's there's an advantage to seeing the sermon in action rather than always hearing it. And you can only get so much in a classroom setting. You know, I've always had a saying that says the brain can absorb as much as the butt can endure in a classroom setting. And you only typically retain 20% of what you hear, but you retain almost, a high percentage of what you see.
Yeah.
So being able to go see that, and the fact that but we have folks like Dr. Work, but that's certainly not where I was headed in this episode. But there is a lot of good stuff. And I guess that all started with reviewing the Blue Coat training down in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah. It's just amazing. It's not just what's happening there. It's what we got planned for 2024. Yeah, the various programs and the resources that are being added, just impressive. Nobody can match that team, right? When you get 40 people in a room all moving in one direction, and you got 40 different personalities, backgrounds, talents, giftings, and it's all in unity. Yeah. That's why I call it a movement.
Well, one of the things that we discovered probably over the course of the last couple of years, I think this is the direction you were heading, is just the amount of material that was having to be shelved for a time, because we just didn't have, you talked about the brain can only absorb as much as the butt can endure. Well, that makes me think back in the day, we would come in on Saturdays, and you and Dr. Owen were teaching at that point, and Christy, I guess, and we'd be there through Tuesday.
Correct.
So that was some intense learning that was going on, and we were able to cover all of that material. Well, we've circled around to that and come to realize that there's some really important fundamental headspace stuff that we just run out of time. And I think it's fair to say we're falling short in that regard. I mean, we're still seeing unbelievable production, But if we get some of that material back in front of our doctors, it's going to make a lot of difference. And I think that's where you were headed.
Well, yeah, I wanted to, basically cover some of the whys because if you're an AMC member and if you're listening, and if you're not, well, this will be news to you in case you are interested in finding out more about what we do. But what you're talking about is the fact that the AMC system is not a manual of scripts.
Mm-mm.
An AMC, it's a thorough system of not just how to operate. It's almost like, it's almost like getting a franchise. It's an A to Z system of how to do everything under the roof of a chiropractic office. But then there's also the development stage that you can absorb that information. Then you have to go home. You're a mentor. You know what I mean? You have to go home and try to execute what you're learning. And then only after you execute it and you experience it face to face with a patient and the interaction, there's a maturation process that takes time, right? You got to bake a cake over time. You take that cake out too early. Well, it's the same thing. You have to go home and evolve. As you evolve through it, then you have these aha moments of, oh, that's what they're talking about when this. So the AMC system, absolutely, as you know, we can transform practices inside of 90 days. It happens all the time, right? But if you're really going to master it, it takes you at least 5 years.
Time.
Because there's so much, what I wanted to cover some of today of, there's so many components just in the patient management. I mean, we could spend the next 15 to 20 episodes doing nothing but patient management and patient compliance, because it's one of the weakest points of patient care in clinics, regardless of your philosophy, regardless of your technique, your background. Patient compliance is one of the weakest components in all of chiropractic. So we could unpack that. So anyway, back to, we recently announced that our summits have, for the last probably 10 years or so, Greg, have turned into a 2-day. And really, by the time people come in and then they start flying out, catching an early flight, we're only getting a day and a half, where you're talking about back in the day. Darn right. I mean, there was a reason my dad got the Iron Bladder Award, right? He could teach, and he'd start at 9 or 10 o'clock, and he started by the clock. I mean, I guess he'd start at 9 o'clock, and he'd start by the clock, but he'd finish whenever he got done. And I think you sat in some of those classes where you were in there at 7:30, 8 o'clock. You're looking at your watch going, okay, well, we'll be releasing here any minute. And all of a sudden the doors open in the back, and he had pizzas brought in. Yeah. And you'd teach till 10 o'clock, and you did that 4 days in a row.
Yeah, I remember.
And here's the thing, you'd come back a month, 6 weeks later, and it would be different, right? It wasn't always the same. There's so much content to teach, but for travel conveniences, we've whittled this thing down. So back to we have now added a Thursday afternoon, and I wanted to unpack some of that today. That's what I was wanting to head with, because I know you have been a component or lead component of putting all that together.
Yeah.
And so I want to unpack some patient compliance factors, give some people some golden nuggets to utilize this week from listening to your podcast. So it's not all just fluff. We give you some meat. But I want the members to understand Thursday afternoon, summits start at 1:30 Thursday afternoon. Mm-hmm. And you can know that the Thursday afternoon is going to be the really deep patient management, patient compliance components that leads to retention and referrals. All right. Retention and referrals resides in compliance. All right. Now, you can't get to compliance if you don't have a strong foundation. So you still have to have your fundamentals and your foundational pieces in place, and you have to master them. But that's like building a skyscraper. I'm talking about when I get to the patient compliance stuff, I'm on floor 10, mm-hmm. right? And if you have not laid a strong foundation for you and your staff and your system and the efficiency of how that practice is running, you're never going to get to floor 10.
Yeah.
But that's what I want to do today is like, let's dive into some of the stuff that they can look forward to on Thursday afternoon so they start making that a priority.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is when Tom mentions the word patient compliance, compliance can have a very strong connotation. But ultimately, and I'm talking to the doctors right now, ultimately somebody has to be in charge in the office. Somebody has to lead that office, and it's got to be the doctor wearing the white coat that's in control and leading. And so when we talk about patient compliance, that's really what we're talking about, is guiding the patient so that they get the very best experience that they can in their office. I talk to so many doctors and have so many conversations where, and I think we've mentioned this before on a podcast, but it's so common for these new patient mills, I'll call them that, where all I need is new patients, doc. That's all I need. Well, that's a doctor that's waiting. It's just a matter of time before they burn out and fall out of love with their practice. The patient needs to experience everything that chiropractic has to offer. And that takes time and it takes compliance. And that's really what we're talking about, is how do we manage our patients through the crazy distractions that they can experience. Oh gosh, we could go down a trail with that, but we're not going to do that because we want to talk specifics. But one of the things that I see in putting this class together, and just with the many, many years that I've been around it, is there are so many things that reside within the AMC protocols, I'll call it that are so subtle, but yet so incredibly powerful. And unfortunately, those are often the things that get tossed to the wayside. And I don't know that it's intentional. I mean, look, I've coached a lot, I've mentored a lot of offices, and I've mentored a lot of docs that have come back to AMC, have, thought that they had all figured out and left and then come back. And what I very, very quickly figure out is it's those subtle things that get left behind. And so, I mean, there's so many examples of that. But what I thought we would talk about kind of in that realm of patient compliance today is I would love to hear, because look, you were the one back teaching in the day when this thing was being built, and it resides in your brain pan somewhere. And I would love to hear your thoughts on bringing a spouse to the report. I think that's something that gets, I think our doctors, until they actually do that and make that a requirement for their patients, that I think there's an apprehension to that. I think they're afraid they're going to get a no, or they're afraid the patient won't come back at all, when that's really not at all the scenario that we're in. But what I'd love to talk about is, how do we do that? How do we ask that question? And then what happens when they don't? What happens when the spouse doesn't come to the report?
I know where you're going, and I know what you're trying to dig out of me there.
Okay.
Because you're talking about, you particularly mentioned the spouse to the report and what that would do.
Well, it's a great example.
It is a great example, but I think that there was a couple of things that you said in your, whatever you...
My diatribe?
Yes. That wasn't the word that I was searching for, but okay, we're going there this morning. But you started it right off as if it was just so natural to you. You didn't give it any second thought that, well, you're in your white coat.
I did. You're right. I said, Yep.
And as soon as somebody that's out there, that's an outlier going, white coat, I'm never going to wear a white coat. So one part of compliance and authority or control of the practice starts in the setting.
Yeah.
How does it feel? What each room should have a certain feel. We're all actors on the stage of life. You got to play the part, right? And I think before I even dive into components of actual interaction with the patient on compliance, which is the spouse, happy to come back to that. But let's unpack a little bit of the fact of the way the clinic looks, and the way dress code is a component to patient compliance. And you have mentored a lot of people that have fought you on the stupid white coat. I'm always been like, I don't care if if I have always been of the opinion that as long as it's moral, legal, and ethical, I will do whatever it takes to get from point A to point B if it's getting somebody towards lifetime chiropractic care. If that means I have to wear a purple jacket, stand on my head, and walk backwards at the street corner, and that's what it takes to get somebody from here to there, and that's what's best for them, I'm willing to do it. So by even talking about a white coat being an issue within chiropractic, it really irritates me because you're making it about yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. Yes.
Who cares what you think? What does the patient think, and what does the patient feel? And if it creates a barrier or an authority and on their decision making, that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I wanted to, I can get on my soapbox about it, but you've mentored a lot of people that have fought you on that. And then what happens just on dress code? Dress code, let's talk about dress code for a few minutes. Let's talk about a little bit of the setting of the office. What's it do for you being an actor on the stage of life? And then we'll get to I'll come back and I'll answer that spouse question that you were asking.
Well, part of what we do when somebody comes on board with the AMC family, assuming they're a doctor in practice, they are bringing us a practice that they want us to help them overcome some sort of a stress point. Now, there's a whole nother podcast right there, a stress point in the practice or overcome. I mean, that we should really do one on that. But there are certain key things that we look for. And one of the things that we do is called an office evaluation. And we're going to capture a video, which is so much easier than it used to be back in the day. I remember when I started coaching and we were trying to get videotapes and all this stuff mailed in so we could review them. Now they can do a series of videos with their phone, text it to me, and I've got it that same day. But there are key things that we are looking for to make sure that when the moment that patient walks into the office for the very first time, this is a brand new patient that's been thinking about coming to a chiropractor for, what I've always been taught is at least 2 years. They've been thinking about coming to a chiropractor. So they finally have made that decision and they step foot inside of a chiropractic office, and the wall across the room from them greets them with nutrition, supplements, pillows, ice packs, and whatever other gadget that particular doctor might have to add to the patient's experience.
And don't forget the TV playing in the corner.
And the TV playing in the corner.
Selling them something.
Selling something.
Or trying to educate them on something.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Mm-hmm. Patients don't want to be sold, right?
Right.
I mean, I've heard you share that before. And we have to create that culture in the office where they're experiencing something that's very different from what they expected. It's healthy. It's a place that feels welcoming to them. And I dare say it needs to be something where they walk in and they go, oh, they grab their pocketbook like, oh, this could be a little bit painful. It's setting value. It's setting the value. It's beginning that process. And oh my gosh, it's so important. Some of those videos, man, I think back to the day Dr. Brubaker and I there's for you AMC family members, there are videos that talk about that. But Dr. Brubaker and I had one time in, I don't know, somewhere in the Midwest with the tiki bar. Do you remember hearing about that one?
I remember the story.
Yeah.
I try to block it out.
But that was, so I would love for you to kind of speak to that and the importance of that culture and them experiencing that. And I guess that goes along with the white coat as well.
Well, we said it. We used the word value.
Yeah.
Right? Respect and value. Why do people refer to begin with? Almost every chiropractor I've ever met, doesn't matter their background, they walked across the stage, and most of them in the back of their mind, they had a dream of a type of practice. They wanted a self-sustaining, stress-free, referral-based practice where they get to practice the art and just love on their patients, and the patients will refer to them left and right? Look, go back to kind of 101. Why do you refer to somebody, right? Well, you refer to people not because of results.
Yeah, there you go.
If that was the case, then the best chiropractors in the country would have just the biggest practices and people would refer to them left and right. That's not the case.
It's not the case
right?
at all.
You don't refer to your real estate agent. You don't refer to your hair salonist. You don't refer to people just because of results. You refer to them first and foremost because you like them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people think, oh, I got that whipped. Everybody loves me. I didn't say friends. I said they like you. And then second thing is respect. They respect and value how you go about it. Well, a lot of the value comes from the feeling of the office. So when they walk in and they're just bombarded with sales, you said I've taught on that before. Yeah, that's not chiropractic. That's just life in general. People, society. People don't like to be sold, but they sure do like to buy.
Absolutely.
And if they see value and then they can respect it, and then they find on the other side of it, if that doctor knows how to communicate correctly, properly, authentically, they feel authenticity coming from a doctor they can tell that doctor understands them. Understands is a big word. They understand them. Then on top of that, the doctor is holding them compliant or having a position of authority. That's where loyalty comes from. That's where retention comes from. And that's where referrals come from.
Yeah.
And that's the missing component. Everybody wants the referrals. Like, oh man, I saved you from your migraines. You suffered from migraines. Why aren't you sending me all these people? Well, you're missing that second half of the formula, which is, we'll wrap it back up to, because I know a while ago you asked me about a component of why does a spouse come to we've gotten off, but yeah. These are components that when the setting is right, and then the dress code, all of those components lead to raising the respect and value meter, right? So, and I know you know that you have mentored people that refuse to wear that white coat. They finally come around to it and go, wow, I am making this decision about me. This is all about me. And then they turn around and do it and say, well, I'll do it for a week or two, because you get them to, well, just try it. And what's their response, Dr. Greg?
Oh, it's why haven't I been doing this all along? Yeah.
But what is their experience? What do they say happens? What's the patient say to them?
You look like a doctor, typically, is the response I get, or something similar to that.
Something to the effect that it's about time you started dressing like a doctor.
Yeah. It's almost always something similar to that. And it changes the mindset of the doctor. Just putting that white coat on and walking around that office as the authority, I have seen it make tremendous changes in what doctors are willing to do for their patients, or able to do.
I certainly didn't mean to get onto the white coat being a big thing,
it's
right?
Important.
But, I've heard this. I've been around this profession my entire life. Every waking moment, I've been around it. And I've heard this thing, and it's always based on, I don't want to, right? Too many I's in the sentence. When everything is I, me, myself, that's a problem. But I don't want to look like an MD. And I've always heard that. And to be completely honest and upfront right here on a podcast, I think that's just the dumbest argument, right? I really do, because look, I've got MD friends. One of my mentors is Dr. Paul Larson. He was the dean of the LSU School of Medicine. Yeah. There's good people on the other side. I'm not bashing them, but I'm just saying, in my mindset, the way I live, they have taken a losing model that doesn't work. It doesn't work. All they have to offer is drugs and surgeries. That's all they got to offer. Right? And look, if I get in an accident and I'm laying on one side of the corner, and my arm is laying on the other side of the corner, don't take me to a chiropractor. Yeah. Okay? All right. So there's a place. But they have taken a losing model and they've beaten the pants off of you. Right?
Well, but why are they wearing the white coat?
Because they teach the same stuff. Some of the things that we're talking about, patient compliance and components, bedside manner, procedures, they are utilizing some of the same principles to get their message across, which we don't agree with that message. I get that, but it has nothing to do with the fact of how are they going about selling that message. You're getting too high and mighty, right? My dad used to say, "Don't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good."
Mm.
You know, and so when we get onto that white coat, I've heard it for decades. Yet, what's the result? What's the effect to the patient?
Every single time.
Every single time. Never fails.
Every single time.
Now, we're going to set this up. You asked me about 15 minutes ago, what's the value or purpose of asking about a spouse? And how does it tie into patient compliance? Anytime that let's just say this, anytime you can get the spouse involved, you're winning.
Oh, you're absolutely winning.
Because doctors, I know you guys think you and ladies have hung the moon, but guess what? Nothing goes beyond the doctor-patient relationship. You're probably inside or giving a report of findings. Let's go before the report of findings. You probably did some type of exam, right? You're in the first day, 2 days of a doctor-patient relationship. Who do they respect, trust more? The doctor or the person that's whispering in their ear before they go to sleep?
Well, I know it would be my spouse.
You don't ever take on, hello, this is not supposed to be a class on a podcast, but you don't ever take on the person. You will always lose when you try to compete against the person that's whispering in the ear. And if the spouse is there, it's important to have the spouse informed, number one. And then if you can get the spouse involved and committed or on the team, on the bandwagon, who's going to hold the patient compliant to the doctor recommendations once care starts? That means you've got a team rather than somebody on the opposing team fighting you and making snarky remarks that is going to, demotivate the patient to continue. Now you've got a team player going, hey, Dr. Miller said this. Don't forget to do the ice. Don't forget to do the stretching and the exercises. We got to make sure that you get the most out of this care. All those components. So I'm not only just the report of findings, I'm going to go back to the exam. If you're doing an exam properly, look, I can't teach that on the podcast.
No. You
got to get yourself to a weekend, to a summit, and let's dive in and let's go deep, right? And that's why we bring the old days, we bring the pizza in, because we would start by the clock and we'd finish whenever we got done, where everyone had an understanding. Nobody perfects anything at a summit. You're not going to perfect it, but you're going to leave with an understanding. So I can't teach that component, but in an exam, I'm going to get to a certain point, and it's to a point, right? It's like, I know exactly the second that this is going to happen. I'm not shooting from the hip. I know how we're going to process. I know what the intro is. I know we're going to go through, going to identify the 5 points. We're going to deal with some components, hope, fear. We're going to talk about the future, relating to the autonomic chart. These are I'm doing this in my head, right? And I'm going to get to a point and I'm going to finally go, my goodness, what I'm finding here is very interesting. And it is interesting, folks. You just think it's another new patient. I'm going to run through an exam, but it's interesting. This is somebody's life, and they've come into a chiropractic office, and people don't try chiropractors. They try chiropractic. This is their chance. This is their opportunity to discover it. You better be excited about it. And then I get to a particular point and I go, my goodness, is there anybody here with you today? And they say, yeah, my spouse is out front.
Gosh.
Would you mind if I just stop and I just ask them to come back and I want them to see what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And then the spouse comes back and they're identifying, and you're walking through, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I have found. Now the spouse is seeing it unfold. And then you and I know we would follow through with how would we wrap that procedure up? But at that point, now, instead of somebody sitting out there reading a magazine or looking on their phone, all playing on Facebook. They're back there engaged in the doctor-patient relationship from the beginning. Then I'll wrap this up because you asked me 20 minutes ago now about why would I bring a spouse to the report and how does it relate to patient compliance? You know, we've unpacked maybe 2 patient compliance factors that are going to be talked about on that Thursday afternoon. You go so much deeper. Yeah. There's a lot of components. We hadn't got to teach to testify. We hadn't gotten to what you and I know as misgut rocks. We hadn't gotten to all those things. We hadn't gotten to sit here, sit there. But to the point of why do I want to bring that spouse? Well, I've already explained one part. How does it relate to patient? You win by asking for that spouse to come to the report of findings either way. Hello. You win either way. If they show up in the patient compliance component, you got a better chance of being the authority and you got a better chance of the spouse being bought in. I've already said that. But what if, Dr. Greg, what if they don't show up? What does that do for you? I'll let you take the spin on that one.
Well, I mean, if they don't show up to our first report, right, then we bring them to the second report. We repeat that request, and hopefully, they'll be at the second report. Oftentimes they're not, though, because they didn't come to the first one. They're not going to come to the second one. But that really gives us an opportunity to say, okay, the fact that your spouse isn't here, that means that you and I together are going to have to make the decisions, and we're going to have to do what it's going to take to correct this problem from you. Because that's the key too, is that's what you've asked me to do, is to tell you what it's going to take to correct the cause of this problem. Because we got to remember that all of this stuff that we're talking about is the foundation under taking this practice from a pain clinic to a clinic that provides lifetime care for patients. So many offices that come to us, that's what we're dealing with. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for. We're going to do this together. You and I are going to help you get through this process.
Right. And since your spouse had 3 opportunities to be here.
Yeah. Right. Exam, R1, R2. Yeah.
Right. We are going to, because we're the ones that are educated in this process. We're the ones witnessing this. And like you said, you asked me to shoot straight with you and come up with what is it going to take to get this corrected and give you a chance for the highest quality of life long term in the future, so that we're not dealing with this, what we know will happen in 5 years. It's up to me and you. And so there's a patient compliance component to something as simple as inviting the spouse to the. It's not just routine, folks.
Nothing is routine.
Nothing, no piece of the puzzle. You don't look. You gotta have all 1,000 pieces to a puzzle, and you can put 995 together, and 5 are missing, and you didn't think they were that important. The white coat wasn't that as important. Spouse, patient orientation class. Whatever the components are, you leave 5 pieces out of 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Is the picture complete? No. Is it as effective? No. Are you going to frame it and put it on a wall?
Absolutely not.
No. Where's your eye?
Unless you're looking to make a point.
Where's your eye go? Where's your eyes go to?
The missing piece.
The missing pieces, right? And then you're left back. I'm going to wrap it up here. You're back to that's why you plateau, folks. That's why you get to a certain point and efficiency starts breaking down and you can't see it. You can't see why I grew it from 5 to 25. I grew it from nothing. I opened it and I got it to 20,000 or 30,000. But man, freedom is at 40 or 50. How would you like to you do 40 or 50 or 60 and work half as hard as you are doing it at 25 and 30? These are the components that we're talking about. And these are the reasons why I wanted to unpack a little bit of this today with you, Greg, so people understand, well, why did we add the Thursday afternoon to an AMC summit? and what kind of deep material is going to be there. It's not introductory material.
No, it's so important.
The introductory material starts actually the next day in a summit. We are putting this deep subject matter there, and it will be constantly being interchanged. So you can look at, there's probably going to be a part 1, 2, or 3 of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
we don't know that, but we'll unpack that as we go. Any closing comments to the day?
I would just say that, we probably ought to do another podcast. We probably ought to, maybe talk about that, plateaus and stress points. I mean, that's another thing that we see a lot with offices that are coming. So maybe our guy over here to the left, Snacks, ought to put that on the list.
How about plateau, stress points, burnout?
Let's do it.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, I hope you got something out of today, but if you didn't, I did. I thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation, as I always do with my good friend, Dr. Greg. But we're going to wrap it up for today. And by all means, you heard it. Summits is where it's at. So AMC members, you get 6 opportunities, only 6 of those a year. And the rubber meets the road at summits. You can't ever replace it. Between that and those on fire and certified training centers, you get the 6 of those and 2 certified training centers or training center visits a year. It is impossible that practice is not going to grow and be more efficient in the process of doing it. So with that, we will talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in. God bless.
Follow our show. You can share it with friends, of course. And we'd love for you to contact us at mailbag@amcfamily.com. In addition, you're always invited to attend or join us at a summit. Of course, registration is required. And we would love for you to check out the loads of free content we provide to social media every single week. Until next time.